It's the debut episode of Sit Down with the Supt. Today, what's being done to make our schools as safe as possible for the return of students and staff. And Remote Learning 2.0, the improvements made to our online learning model and how we're working to serve the needs of every student. Now, Superintendent Mike Merlino and your host, Craig Bernbach.
Hello and welcome to our first ever edition of Sit Down with the Supt. I'm Craig Bernbach, the Communications Manager here at Evergreen Public Schools, and I'll be your host of the Sit Down with the Supt show. It's the show where Superintendent Mike Merlino takes time to give you updates on important things going on in our schools and our district. Of course, the beginning of the 2020-21 school year is different than any that we've had in the past. Now, due to the ongoing threat of COVID-19, we opened up schools in remote learning, but the hope is that we will soon be able to get into a hybrid learning model. Now, we know there are a lot of questions about what schools will look like when students are able to return. So with that in mind, before we start our conversation with Superintendent Merlino, we wanted to give you a look at some of the elements that we have put in place to make sure that schools are as safe as possible for students and staff. It's an approach that will be guided by the best available science and direction from state education leaders and state and local health departments.
We're taking guidance from state and local health and education officials, but we can and are going further than the recommendations to take care of our students and staff in our schools.
So what will students, staff, and visitors experience when they enter our schools as they begin to reopen? Well, it's already started. All Evergreen Public Schools staff are required to take a training course on COVID-19 infection prevention. The plan also involved a visit to every one of our schools to see what needed to be done to make schools as safe as possible.
We walked through every school with an eye on social distancing, the personal protective equipment we would need, and how our custodial staff would need to conduct enhanced cleaning procedures.
The district has purchased new masks and other personal protective equipment and cleaning supplies. Our maintenance staff has worked since the spring to make sure our HVAC systems are in proper working order, have the latest filters, and to increase outdoor air ventilation as much as possible. As students and staff come to school each day, they or their parents will have to submit a daily certification through their Skyward account that they're not showing any signs of illness and have not been in close contact with someone who has a confirmed or suspected case of COVID-19 infection.
What's your name?
Students, or whose parents don't or forget to submit the certification, will have to go through a short health screening, including a temperature check completed by a school employee. So what will it be like when students enter school? Of course, any person entering an Evergreen Public Schools facilities building is required to correctly wear a face covering that is consistent with health department rules, over the mouth and over the nose. In front offices and other student interaction offices, there are new plexiglass barriers like you may have seen go up in your local grocery store. In all of our schools, from classrooms to auditoriums and more, there will be social distancing requirements, keeping students and staff 6 feet apart. Our custodial contractor, ABM, is launching a comprehensive cleaning program using approved but less toxic products to help control the spread of COVID-19. In addition to the normal cleaning routine, ABM will perform enhanced cleaning on common high-touch surfaces, doorknobs, light switches, handrails, and the like. Teachers will limit the use of shared hands-on teaching materials, but classrooms will have disinfecting wipes available for the occasional cleaning of manipulatives, toys, and equipment. Keep in mind that some shared equipment like computer lab keyboards, musical instruments, or cameras can be damaged by cleaning solutions. In those instances, students will need to follow a hand washing strategy before they use that equipment, which is always a good idea. When it comes to recess, outdoor play areas are not typically cleaned on a regular basis, and it's not been proven to reduce the risk of COVID-19. That said, students are going to be asked to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer after being outside on the playground. And each school will have a designated social distancing team, typically led by the school principal.
Our job is going to be to make sure that students and staff follow the guidelines.
social distancing, proper use of face coverings, frequent hand washing, proper cleaning procedures, and traffic flow. Basically, how do we get students and staff safely in and out of our buildings?
We also want to mention that there are new procedures for getting students safely to and from school.
Since the spring, we've been working with transportation experts to develop new policies and procedures to enhance the safety for all our students on our school buses.
That means, again, that masks will be worn properly on buses, enhanced cleaning procedures for buses, and assigned seating arrangements will fit with social distancing requirements. We know that was a lot of information to take in, and it's not all the safety precautions that we're taking on as we move towards welcoming students back into the schools, but we wanted to share the process with you. It's also why we wanted to start our Sit Down with the Supt series right now when you have so many questions. And with that in mind, I want to welcome in Mike Merlino, the Superintendent of Evergreen Public Schools. And Mike, we are sitting 6 feet apart for safety concerns. I do want to just start with the latest obstacle that we're dealing with. Right now on September 17th, we have had smoke and bad air quality for a few days that have closed the buildings. How has that affected the timeline of us getting into the hybrid model?
It hasn't affected the timeline at all as far as moving forward to get to the hybrid. It has affected, we were planning on starting a kindergarten pilot program. We've had to delay that a few days. But if in terms of how do we move forward to having kids back in our buildings, it hasn't slowed that down.
All right, so that's good news.
Yeah.
And when we talk about getting to the hybrid mode, of course, we are in remote learning now. We hope that we'd be able to start in school, but the goal is to get to the hybrid model maybe as early as October. Can you let people know what goes into that decision? It's not just your decision, of course.
Yeah, so we've been kind of following state guidelines all summer long, all fall. I guess we haven't quite got to fall yet, but we're getting to fall. So OSPI puts out guidelines. The governor's worked with the Department of Health. They created a decision tree that kind of gave broad direction on how you would get back to hybrid learning. Within Clark County, the Clark County superintendents, the Cowlitz County superintendents have been working actually really closely with the Clark County Department of Health. Dr. Alan Melnick and then Dr. Steve Krager are our local contacts that we've been working with, and basically in conjunction with those folks, we looked at the decision tree, which says it's all about case transmission. So how many cases per 100,000 are transmitting within your county? So you've got a high level, you've got a moderate level, and a low level. So if you're below 25 cases per 100,000, that's low. If it's between 25 and 75 per 100,000, it's moderate, and over 75 is high. In any of those scenarios, students in small groups can be on campus working with staff. But what our county has settled on is within the moderate range of 25 to 75 cases per 100,000, starting the week of the 21st of September, so starting next week. And the reason we started with the 21st is because you have Labor Day, you have some folks getting together potentially. The incubation period is up to a couple weeks, so let's see what the rates are like starting the 21st. If there's 3 consecutive weeks in the moderate range, 25 to 75 cases per 100,000, so the 21st, the 28th, the 5th of October, that would then put us in a position to get to the hybrid plan that we have, the hybrid program in elementary school. So we're kind of waiting to see next week. I think we've had at least 5 consecutive weeks of being below in the moderate range. So the trend is good. And basically what we're just trying to do is see, have we plateaued? Do we have declining cases? That allows us to start bringing folks, the kids and our staff together. And of course, all of this is governed by the guidelines that we've received from the CDC, the Department of Health, OSPI, the state with respect to social distancing, masks, the protocols when kids come, and cohorts, all of that. So that's kind of where we're at. That's how we get to hybrid.
All right, so best case scenario right now is early October. Elementary schools would start hybrid, and then the path to secondary kids getting back into school in a hybrid model, there's also a plan for that.
Correct. So again, if we continue to move in the right path, and understanding that even before we're in hybrid, we are bringing small groups of kids in. And I'm going to touch on that for just a minute. Starting maybe tomorrow, if the smoke conditions subside, we will have 4 elementary schools bringing in kindergartners in groups of 5 or less. That's Sifton, Image, Crestline, and York Elementary. That will expand to all elementary kindergarten classes the week of the 28th. Next week, the week of the 21st, we expand the number of students coming in that are on IEPs. So we're serving kids K through 12 on IEPs. I mentioned the following week, the 28th, we bring in kindergarten students in groups of 5 or less across the district. We've also had student engagement teams at each school identifying students that maybe need a little bit of extra support. Those kids will also be coming in K through 12 starting the week of the 28th. And then again, as cases continue, if they are flat or declining, that's when we go full hybrid in elementary, hopefully the week of the 12th. And what that means is basically you'd have half of the students coming on a Monday and a Tuesday. You take Wednesday off for remote learning, allow our teachers who have done an unbelievable job to spend time putting together lesson plans for kids when they're not on site. And then that second group of kids would come on Thursday and Friday. That would go for 3 weeks. If we continue to have 3 more weeks of success, it allows us then to consider moving, and what we're looking at is then middle school is the next step. So you could conceivably have a November time frame potentially of middle school. We would then look at high school after that. So it's kind of a step process that's all tied to the cases, which is why it's really important for all of us to follow the recommendations with respect to masks and with respect to social distancing and just kind of taking care of each other and ourselves so that we can, it's from the beginning, well before the summer even came in May, June. I will say all summer long, myself, our staff at the district office, the school board, we've been meeting and talking. We want nothing more than to have our students on site in school. That's what everyone wants. But we have to do it the appropriate way, the safe way. And so we're hopeful that we can get there with continued success with respect to the case transmission in the county.
Thank you so much, Mike. All right, let's take a bit of a breather. When we get back, we're going to discuss remote learning and how EPS took lessons from the spring to make remote learning 2.0 work better for everyone. Now, one of the ways the district tries to help is by making sure that tech issues don't stand in the way of our students accessing the information they need. Today, it's EPS Tech 101, the basic information you'll need to access Remote Learning 2.0. The first thing, make sure your device is connected to Wi-Fi. That's how you'll be able to access Google Classroom and other applications we'll be using in Remote Learning 2.0. Now remember, you don't have to have a district-issued device. If you've got a home laptop, desktop, computer, or tablet that you prefer, by all means, use that. So how do you sign in? Well, if you've got a district-issued laptop, your login is right there on the startup screen. Enter your user district-issued name and password to log into ClassLink. If you're using your own device, you'll find a link to ClassLink on our Evergreen Public Schools homepage at evergreenps.org. Just look for the ClassLink logo. Once you're logged into ClassLink, you'll be able to find Google Classroom, the platform we will be using for Remote Learning 2.0. This is what a sample Google Classroom page for a high school student might look like, with a different link for each class or subject. The main ClassLink page also allows you to access other applications and websites that students may use depending on their grade level, teacher, or specialized class. The last thing we want to mention is very important. Your first point of contact for problems with your device, your password, or Google Classroom is your classroom teacher. Contact your student's teacher and they'll work to get you up and running. If your teacher's not available, go to the main ClassLink page and look for the Tech Support Request link, which you see highlighted here. Fill out the form and detail your problem and we'll get to work on it. Welcome back to Sit Down with the Sup. I'm Craig Bernbach, and this, of course, is Superintendent Mike Merlino. And Mike, we had hoped that we'd be starting the fall off with in-person learning, but because of the COVID-19, we are in remote learning right now. Your staff knew that that was a possibility and all summer long worked on Remote Learning 2.0. Can you let people know what the improvements in Remote Learning 2.0 compared to what was going on in the spring to where we are now in the fall with remote learning?
Right. I guess the first thing I would say is, when everything shut down in March, basically the district and the whole state had to go from on-site learning to remote learning in maybe 10 days roughly. I mean, we took a little bit of a break there. Also, the conditions at that time, a lot of it was being driven down from the state. So there were things around. Really, we weren't going to do grading. It was just going to be kind of working on emotional supports, which was kind of it was a disincentive for participation. If you had grades where you felt comfortable, what would be the incentive for a student to continue? So I would say that, first of all, the conditions are different where we had more time to plan. We have kind of more effort, I wouldn't say effort, but more work has gone into building an instructionally solid program. We had the opportunity to do some surveys, not just with our parents, but with our staff as well. And so you mentioned the staff. I do want to thank our teaching and learning staff, all of the individuals that worked all summer long to make that happen. Ultimately created a schedule that I think is working well for families. I think we had families that were concerned. Is it going to be the way it has been in the spring? Is it going to be the same way? We had some families that were thinking about potentially homeschooling. Once we started it up, where you do have synchronous, asynchronous, you have live teaching, you have on-demand teaching for families, you have a daily schedule. They're still seeing their specialists in elementary schools. We're having opportunities in the secondary to have periods taught live. I think we're getting really a positive feedback, but it really couldn't have been done without the staff effort over the summer, and then honestly with the teachers. If you think about you go to school, you learn how to teach, you teach for years, and then all of a sudden overnight now you're a remote learning instructor. So I feel good that we were in a position. Our voters had supported us with technology levies so that we actually had the devices for our students to be able to access their education. Not everybody had that ability. But really, it's remarkable how quickly we kind of went from a traditional school to an online school overnight.
And of course, the families and the parents, while this has been difficult, we have seen some, the families during this difficult situation making sure that they're getting their students there, to work. Yeah.
This is absolutely a partnership because, we create the content and work with the students in these settings, but then our parents and our families and our extended families have to help their children on a daily basis with the work, getting them online in the morning. We basically have asked parents to become technology specialists and experts. Like I myself, I have kids in school, and just making sure you've got the right links to get to the right, and you got Google Classroom. There's another thing that we did. We had a number of software platforms and packages that we were using. We tried to narrow that down so that there's more consistency what we're using in the buildings. Parents and families understand, students understand. We got Google Classroom, we've got Seesaw in the elementary. We're trying to narrow that down and make it easier for our staff, but not our staff, but our families. Even with all that, it's unprecedented. I can't tell you how many times I've said unprecedented in about an 18-month or 2-year window. It's ridiculous. But it is unprecedented what we're asking everyone to do. So we've done our best to create the technology hotlines, have access at buildings, at the district office to support our families, make sure that we've got technology access for everyone. It's been a monumental effort, and I appreciate our families, I appreciate our staff for everything we've done.
Of course, one of the big concentrations has been on our vulnerable students and trying to make remote learning as equitable as possible. It is very difficult. What are some of the steps that the districts and your staff have done to make sure that we're getting to as many students as possible and making remote learning work for as many students as possible?
So one of the things is it was real important to us that we start the first day, and I'm not saying we were perfect, but we start the first day as normal as we can in this normal, which meant to us that our kids had to have their devices. So there was a lot of time that was spent early on in the summer, in August, making sure that we were doing that work. The buildings had the devices they needed. And again, like I said, it wasn't perfect. We also wanted to make sure that we had access. If you don't have access, it's going to be really hard in a remote learning situation. So we purchased additional hotspots. We've created the contact, the ability for families to connect with us to make sure that we can be sure that they have the access that they need. We have families, our buildings are open, so we still have families that come in. One of the things that we found early on is that, you know, we just need to work with our family. We've known it all along. We need to work with our families in any way that we possibly can. Reach out. If people are having a hard time at home connecting, we need to find ways to support them. If they don't have a wireless connection, they don't have access, we got to get them the hotspots. If sometimes they need to get into the building to be able to access things, we need to make that happen too. So we just have to be real accommodating with all of our staff. The student engagement teams are looking at the first few weeks. I mentioned what's different. We definitely have grading this year. You know, in K-12 we're grading. That wasn't the case last spring. We have attendance. That wasn't really the case last spring. So we're constantly checking in, our kids logging in, our kids doing the work. Those kids that aren't, then we've got teams of people that involve counselors, deans, teachers, administrators in buildings that then are identifying the students that we can then reach out and start bringing in these small groups. Even before we get to the hybrid, we need to have kids. They need to be supported. Over the course of the next several weeks, we'll start identifying not only what kids, but what classes are there that we might need. What are the more hands-on classes? There are CTE classes where, and I understand everything has to be cleaned if it's hand-on. I don't want to say hands-on.
Right,
obviously, we're cleaning things. But we have to have those types of classes where it's hard to do some of the study and some of the work. Identifying them, because one of the things is to get to hybrid, you know, we've got big schools, so we need to bring kids in and follow the protocols in smaller numbers and continually build over time to the point that when we get to hybrid, it's not going from we have, you know, 20 kids in a building to 300 kids in an elementary or 200 in an elementary. We want to build up so that families are comfortable. And I would also say throughout this whole process, when we're in hybrid, we still will offer the opportunity for families to choose remote learning, and we've surveyed recently and about 20% of the families say we want to stay with remote. And in remote learning, I think there are families that say, I want to see how this works first. I want to see, I talked to my friends that had their kids go to school. How did they handle coming to school? How did they handle feeding kids? How did they handle the social distancing in the classroom? How are they handling those things? They may wait a couple, 3 weeks or a month and then say, you know what, I feel like they are doing the right thing. We need to get our child in as well. And we're going to allow that to happen also. We want to work with families. Honestly, we don't exist as a safe, I say it all the time. If kids aren't in our schools, if kids don't come here, we're not here. We're only here to support our kids. So that's what our job is, and that's what we have to do every day.
All right, so it's a key point that remote learning will still be offered when we go to hybrid model, and if someone decides that they want to start remote learning once we go to hybrid, but then want to then go into the hybrid model, they'll be able to do that. Really is a team effort here with the teachers, principals, our families, our administrators. You know, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. And we're going to do these sit down with the Supt shows periodically throughout the school year. Now, eventually, Mike, we are going to solicit questions from staff and students, and you never know what they're going to ask. Are you okay with that?
Yeah, that was not something you ran by me earlier, so no, I'm not interested in that. Thank you, though, for asking.
All right, so there were going to be questions. No, we will be able to get questions. And
of course, I'm happy to answer any questions. I've had all kinds of questions, and they keep coming, and I'll be there for you.
Excellent. So we can't wait to be able to see, be able to see students and be able to ask them what they want to ask the superintendent, and I can't wait for the kindergarten questions.
Yeah, that'll be good. I look forward to it.
That's going to be great. Now, thanks again, Mike, for joining us. We want to let everyone know that we want you to follow us on social media. We want you to know what's going on in your schools. Here's a look at how you can keep up to date with Evergreen Public Schools on social media. Check out our Facebook page Facebook.com/EvergreenPS. Follow us on Twitter at EvergreenPS. Our Instagram account is evergreen_public_schools. And check out our YouTube channel, youtube.com/EvergreenSchools.